That's okay.
Okay, everybody, can I have your attention, please? Okay. All right, everybody, thanks once again. Thanks for coming out to the event today. You're the brave crew stuck it through the whole day. Came to dinner. Not like those other people who left early and I gotta go home. You guys are all here, so we appreciate it. I just really want to thank everybody. You know that the club really exists because of you, the members, right? It's all about all of us and having the car and enjoying ourselves and having a good time. So, you know, we can have great events as long as we have people come out and support the club. So again, you know, everybody pitched in today on a raffle. Everybody helped out today at the shop, and it was just a really, really nice day. I think we had beautiful weather, thank God. And I just appreciate everybody coming out today. So, without further ado, we have a. Oh, I'm sorry. Hold on. Oh, I'm sorry. Dan Deutsch, our DMA president, would like to say a few words. You probably saw Dan today running around and doing stuff underneath cars, on top of cars, and he didn't clean my car. Nobody cleaned my car today. That's not good. So, here's Dan.
Thank you. And thank you, Kevin, for the bandana. Kevin knows I like to wear bandanas to keep the sun off my head and all that. And he had the custom one made up. And I believe there are some others available also, and skull caps. Today is a great day, perfect weather. We had elections. We'd like to say thank you, first of all, to Aaron Crocco, who's not here tonight, and for Lauren Riley for their service as officers. Laura's here, though, so you can raise her hand. We have a new treasurer, Kevin Abato. We have a new activities director, Stephen Card. Where is he? Oh, he's over there. Stephen Card makes the cards. So, go figure. There's a joke in there somewhere with that. And, well, I think, oh, that's right. Where's Tiffany? Where is she? Oh, there she is. Hi, Tiffany. Tiffany, stand up. That nice and sunburned Tiffany's our new secretary for the club. What's her last name? Oh, something like it starts with an O, and it ends, I think, with a K. So, okay. And I think everybody needs to really give Kevin a really big round of applause for putting this together today. He has totally outdone himself with this one. Wait till you guys see the dessert. There's some editing on the dessert, the cake.
Hold on. I thank you for the applause, but there's other people. My wife Cheryl, Stephen Card, Mark Levy, Dan, everybody pitched in, everybody made it possible, so I can't take much credit. They all helped.
Just for the record, I wasn't giving Kevin all the credit, but I was giving him most of it. He did a great job. Everybody did a wonderful job. Okay. Speaker now. I'd like to introduce someone who has a lot of knowledge, a lot of history, and I believe is very interested in the cars and has given a lot of time to the club, and we really appreciate it. Very interesting fellow. Came up with designed the original prototype twin turbos for the DeLoreans that were supposed to go to production in '84, I believe that is. And that's Mr. Fred Dellis. He's going to come up and speak. Give him a round of applause.
thanks for inviting me. Before we get started, I'd just like to introduce a few people that I actually brought with me. First of all, my wife, Ann. And then Don DeLis and Tammy, his wife. I'd like to tell you about Don for a second because he's a real automobile person. It's one of the reasons I had him come. How many Lotus people are there in the room? Put your hands up. Pretty good representation. Are there any Brooklyn people in the room also?
One over here.
I assume the rest of you are DeLorean people. Don's background, Don was actually national sales manager for Ferrari, and then he was executive vice president of sales and marketing for Lotus. So you might want to talk to him later as a bonus here for having Don come in. Don and I are personally good friends, and we card chat on a daily basis, if not through the phones, usually on email. So I'm real pleased to have you come. Thanks, Don. You know, I've been here several times on a national basis with Ken, and on a couple of Mid-Atlantic meetings, and it's always great to come here because I see a lot of old friends and a lot of new people that join the club. And I asked Mark, when Mark was on the phone with me, what would you like me to talk about? Because I have a short history with DeLorean. We go back a long ways, but there's only so many things you can talk about as it relates to this particular topic and our involvement. So he said to me to first go over a little bit of what Legend was, Legend Industries, for some of the new members, and I'll give you the Reader's Digest version so I don't bore everybody in the room who's heard it before. Legend Industries is a marketing and engineering company, primarily engineering, but we did have a marketing division that did basic OEM work, design work for various manufacturers, Fiat, Ferrari. We did some work for Ferrari, Porsche, Volkswagen, and of course DeLorean. And we did some work for Ford Motor Company. We had an interesting group of people working for the company who've gone on and done some incredible things, and we're really proud of some of the people that worked with me at that particular time. Chris Theodore is one of them, who ended up being Executive Vice President of Engineering for Ford Motor Company. Chris just retired from that job and is now Chairman of ASC, which is American Sunroof Corporation. So Chris and a lot of other people went off to do some pretty impressive things. And I got an opportunity to meet some great people through the DeLorean project. Between Giugiaro, who was the tab design, and Chapman, who obviously did the design on the chassis. We met a lot of great people in the course of putting a project like this together. Legend was really started out of the dealership. I owned the Porsche Audi store, and we put the original amount of money. We put $7,000 to panel the basement of the Porsche dealership, and that's how it started. And from there, we eventually became an OEM. We had some patents. We got lucky. We became fairly successful and did hundreds of millions of dollars in business eventually. We designed our own building. We grew out of the dealership, obviously, and our first real contract that we had, OEM contract, was with Fiat Motors in North America. And from that, we got some business with Ferrari, and then Porsche, and then the rest of it's history with John DeLorean. We'll switch to the DeLorean thing for a second because that's really the major emphasis of why you have me here tonight. When I was in school, I always used to read about John DeLorean because even on our way here, we were talking to Tammy and my wife about where was DeLorean in automobile history. Most of them know him from his car business, but those who are old enough in the room remember that he really started the muscle car era in the United States. And I'll tell you an interesting story that John told me. Most of you will know what the GTO is. During the early 60s, John ran Pontiac Motor Division for General Motors and actually came out with the GTO. The real story with the GTO, he almost got fired. John, being head of General Motors, the Pontiac division, wanted an adult toy to take home and race up and down the boulevard. So what he did is he took a Tempest, Pontiac Tempest, and had him take a Bonneville engine and install it in that car for his personal car to take back and forth to work. Well, it became so popular that various engineers within the company would want to borrow it for the weekend and hop right up and down the strip with it. So they thought it was a pretty good idea. What he wanted to do is he wanted to produce the car. So he went to the board at General Motors and he says, listen, I have this great idea. I think we should build this car. And they turned him down. And he felt so strongly about this that what he did is made it what they call an RPO option. He made it an option for the Tempest. So initially it was a Tempest with the high performance option in it, which they called the GTO. Went on to be one of the most successful cars at General Motors. It was so successful, by the time they found out what he did, they couldn't fire him at that point. So that's the story of John and how my reading in school, I was still in school at the time, reading about John DeLorean. He was one of my heroes. So John went off, he went from Chevrolet division to Pontiac division, and then eventually spun off and built the DeLorean Motor Company. I wanted to do some work for DeLorean at the time because he was like a national hero in the automobile business. And I talked to various people within my company and I said, we got to get to meet John somehow. And he said, you can't get to see him. Are you crazy? I said, listen, you can see the President of the United States if you want to. You just have to find a way. We're going to have to find a way to see this guy. So we tried a number of different ways, and obviously between various blocks in the channels to get to see John, a million questions, what do you got to see him? We'll let him know you called. Message never got to him, obviously. Somebody screened it and decided we weren't important. And I said, this is crazy. I'm going to write him a letter. So I did. I wrote John a letter, and I said on the letter, you didn't get where you were in life, not listening to people. So it was about a 2-paragraph letter. And he wrote me back a 1 paragraph. I wrote him back a 3-word letter. He wrote me back a 1-word letter. And it said, when? And he signed his name across it. And that's how I met John DeLorean. When I got into his office on Park Avenue, he said to me, you're the guy that likes to write letters. And I said, well, I got it in his office, didn't I? So he said, sit down. And about 3 months after that, we had a purchase order for $20 million to design the DeLorean Twin Turbo. And that's how it started. That was my relationship with John. Most people really, don't understand what it takes to develop a car. And the big question is, why is it so expensive to design a car? We can buy turbos in the aftermarket, we can buy certain things, but when it comes to designing it for an OEM and developing it so a car company can sell it, why does it become so expensive? Are we paying for all the salaries and the overhead? And to some degree you are. But you're also paying for something to be thoroughly designed and properly designed. I brought with me, I dug this out of files in the basement. This is typically what it takes. Tom, maybe you can hold it up. Yeah, you can hold it. There you go. This is what it takes, a development chart, to produce the DeLorean Turbo over a 2-year period with about 44 people working on it. And you can't see it from a distance, but we'll put it up and somebody can come up and see it, read it later. But it takes you from prototype design all the way through production to include the owner's manuals of the cars and all the things and the certification for the EPA and the like. And it gets pretty expensive. Because when you design these things, you don't design them only for proper use. Everybody in this room maintains their cars properly and all. But you have to design them for a multitude of reasons. You have to design them to work at 8,000 feet in altitude. You have to have them in Canada at 40 below zero. You have to run them in the desert with the air conditioning on and an idle at 120. And then you have to run them without maintenance. 2 quarts short of oil, all the particulars that need to be for the overall use of the vehicle. So it has to take not only the abuse, but the misuse and mismaintenance in order for you to stand behind it and warranty the product. So the development period in terms of building and installing and making something like this run and then amortizing all the engineering expense gets quite expensive. That's why your cars are so expensive today. And then there's liability insurance, and that gets to be on a car of this nature. It can get quite expensive. It could be as much as $1,000 a car. So anyhow, that's basically how I came into this, how John DeLorean, the John DeLorean issue, how I met John. And we went on to I stayed friends with John until he died, actually. And I spoke to him a few days, actually before he passed away, and attended his funeral. We became personally good friends, talk weekly. And, it's another discussion for another time. Pretty sad to see what happened to him in life because he was an extremely talented person, and I got very close to him. Okay, we can put that down and people can look at it. Legend Industries, before we get into the slides, this logo, I was sued by Litton Industries. Litton Industries sued me because they thought they owned 2 letters in the alphabet, the L and the I. As a result of it, I, at the time, put up the money. We went to court. About a year and a half later, we won, obviously. And that was the logo. And that's an expensive logo to design. It's very simple now, but to get one that's simple, it really works. It's pretty good. That's a registered trademark. Okay, Don. Up, the other way, Don. Up. No, we're going in the wrong direction. There you go. These are some of the publications that we reviewed. Some of them are Fiat and stuff, but a lot of them are DeLorean, as you can see. They got reviewed for the twin turbo. And it's important to know that there's a difference between a prototype and a pre-production prototype. We got all the way to a pre-production prototype, and that means representative of the car that would have been sold and bought, by the people in this room. So that was reviewed by all those publications, in fact, internationally. In fact, you even see Penthouse up there. Somehow or another, I think that was Fiat, though. Okay. That was the rendering of Legend Industries that we built. We actually designed that building, and we built that building. We had it built, but that was our design in terms of the building. It was located in Hopog, Long Island. It was in total about 30,000 square feet, including a mezzanine. And if we get to the next slide, you'll see, you can't see from the distance, but this was basically the office complex, which was everything from sub-engineering, marketing, conferencing areas, and the like. And in this area over here, this is a mezzanine for engineering, all the dynamometer cells, the lifts. These areas back here related to the emission charts. We actually had all the emission control stuff, and we could certify the car ourselves, actually. And then you have some production, which was in the back, and basically there was all parts. So it was kind of like one of the most sophisticated R&D development places in the country at the time. Not the largest, but certainly one of the most sophisticated. So we had a lot of fun. We built that ourselves, and we were pretty proud of it. That was an actual twin-turbo display engine. That wasn't a running engine. Somebody called me on this engine and actually said, I have it in my car or something like that. I said, you can't have that one in your car because there's nothing in it. I mean, this engine was done for the NADA show, which is National Automobile Dealers Association, which John and I went to in San Francisco at the time. So that you know, Johnny Carson was also, and those older from this room know who Johnny Carson is. Johnny Carson was also an investor in the company, and it was Johnny Carson, John, and myself. We made this presentation, and that was the display engine, and eventually went around to a lot of shows. Just another shot of Don. That's a side view of the engine. Actually, I'll tell you, these engines are more expensive to build than an actual motor, because it's a one-off. It's got to be all chromed and detailed correctly, and cutaways and stuff. They're pretty expensive. So as you can see, the side, this is one bank, obviously. The twin turbos on one side. On the other side, obviously the other one, the twin intercooled. Mark has one. You know car here today? Yep. So Mark has one. You can take a look at Mark's car, and it was a very interesting car. I might add at this time that, as Don and I were discussing on the way here today, this was during the time where Corvettes only had 230 horsepower. So it came out of the emission stage when we had rock-gut gasoline and things weren't available. So we went through a terrible time. So to have something that performed this well was quite unique. Yeah. Now, I kind of put this slide in here for Don, because Don loves Corvettes too. Anybody in the room know who that is? I give you a big hint, other than Don.
Danto.
There you go. His actual name is Zora Arcus Duntorf. He's the father of the Corvette. And he was the chief engineer at Corvette for quite a while, about 2 decades. That's outside our building. John DeLorean, I'll show you, had a good heart. John called me up and he said, you got to help a guy out. So I said, sure, who is it? So he said, Zora was being abused by General Motors and not treated in a respectful way for a guy that really did what he did for General Motors. So he said, do you have any work for him? And the answer to that was yes. Now, Zora spent half his time in Grosse Pointe, Michigan, and the other half of his time during the summer and the warm weather out in the Hamptons. He had a home in the Hamptons. So Zora and I became friendly. We had dinners and stuff and lunches together, and I hired him in as a consultant on the DeLorean product. So this is an important person for me, certainly for Don. Don has a Z06 also, Corvette, so you know, it's an important guy in history, a very important guy. Yeah. Okay, next quiz. Don, you can't answer this question. Anybody know who this is? Keep going. Anybody? Take a guess.
I can't see the face.
The older guys in this room should know. Okay, I'll tell you. That's Sergio Pininfarina. Okay, Sergio Pininfarina. And that's me when I had hair. Okay. That's outside of our building on Long Island. And that was the turbo Spider that we built. And Sergio Pininfarina was building the bodies at the time, shipping them to us. We were installing the engines in Long Beach, California, and Jacksonville, Florida. So we kind of collaborated on this. And it was things that he had to do and I had to do together. So a really interesting guy, and went off and did great stuff. I'll tell you a story about Pininfarina and I. Real quick one. I had looked at my schedule. Sergio was coming over, and this was the meeting, in fact. And I looked at my calendar, and I never missed my son's events, whether a baseball or a play. I looked at the calendar, and I saw that morning my son was having a play in school. And I got sick to my stomach. So I said, you know what? I called him up. He was staying at the Waldorf that night, and I said to him, listen, I have something I have to tell you, and there's no way around it. I'm going to tell you exactly what the truth is. I said, my son has a play tomorrow morning. I know we're supposed to have a meeting tomorrow morning. And if this means we can't do business anymore, we're not going to do business anymore, I got to go this way. So he said to me, I said, look, you can take my credit card, go shopping, have a good time, do whatever you want in Manhattan, and I'll meet you for lunch. He says, don't even worry about it. Go to lunch, do the thing you have to do with your kid, and meet me later, and that's exactly what happened. So he's a real good guy also. So it worked out. Don? You know who that other guy is? You don't know who this guy is, so I'm in trouble. Okay. I don't know. That's a pretty good shot. I will tell you that some of the photographs in here, we had an advertising and public relations director at Legend. We tried, our goal was we really had to try to do everything as perfect as we possibly could. We were really fanatical about things, including the way we kept the building, dress codes, or you name it. We tried to do, because we felt that that would get into the body of the work, that level of excellence. And our advertising director, I think, shot that picture, which was great because he framed it with the door and stuff, and it worked out well. That wasn't staged; it was really happening. Next shot. Okay, here's what I thought I'd cover today. The one thing that we didn't ever discuss in any of these groups were the twin turbo ride and drive that we sponsored for John DeLorean. He paid for it, but we conducted it for him. There was a great track on Long Island called Bridgehampton Raceways, and it was beautiful because you could see Peconic Bay. It was a beautiful track. It wasn't maintained terribly well, but still a great track. And we rented it for the day. We used to lease it a lot off and on because we used to do some testing out there, but we thought it would be a great place to have the DeLorean ride and drive. And this is the first time that John DeLorean actually drove the finished product. He had had a lot of meetings about it, and it was all engineering meetings, marketing meetings, but he had never driven the car. So we pulled people in from France, of course, because of the Peugeot Renault Volvo motor. We pulled Dr. Tomas in. We pulled Barry Wilson, who's somebody who had met, and you met with Mark, right? And Barry and I still talk together. And we, John DeLorean, of course, and company, and a lot of people from both Belfast, England, and also in France and Italy. So we picked them up at the airport in the city. We had Long Island helicopter go pick them up. We flew them right to the track, and this is the beginning of the day. Okay, that's John getting off the plane, and that's me. So we were out there hustling around just like you people were today, trying to get everything ready. Okay. And this is the entourage that was walking in. The first part of the meeting was really all pretty much engineering, and that lasted about half a day. And if we go to the next slide, you might start seeing some. Okay, we took the tower of the track and converted that into an office, and we converted that into a. We had it catered. We had lunch, where breakfast and lunch actually catered in, and we ran that. So this was Legend Industries, obviously, and as you can see, it was November of 1981. And that was a naturally aspirated car and a turbo car on the other side, the far side. Okay. Some more shots. There was a lot of preparation. I'll tell you, the key to doing these things right, so they really come off, is that it's kind of like running a Broadway play. There are hundreds of people behind the scenes that you don't really see, and you only see the actors in front. And that's really what you want to do. You want to do this thing with the least amount of commotion, and everything is in the preparation. You got to make sure everything comes off right. So that's me making sure that everything comes off right. So, okay. Even the bridge, we had the bridge over the straightaway covered twin turbo, and John, as you can see, when he got off the plane, he lit up when he saw all that stuff, because they did a flyby, kind of like Top Gun type thing around the track, and eventually they got him up. We got him up to where you see him. Okay. Again, there's a lot that goes on. I just threw some of these slides in so you people could take a look. This is one of the twin turbo engines that was on the dynamometer. And if you notice, by the way, those that are sharp enough to know, the alternator location is changed on the turbo as opposed to the straight naturally aspirated car. Okay. There's some data coming out that we had to read out. The dynamometer development work is twofold. It really runs in two chapters, really. One is really doing all the measurements, making sure that you have it mapped out correctly. It's knowing lungs mapping. And the other side of it is durability testing. You have to make sure that the thing lives. The first shot out of the box at maximum horsepower, the engine only lived for 12 minutes on the dyno before it blew up. Eventually, after 2 years worth of work, it made it 1,000 hours. So you could never drive a car that hard in the street at 1,000 hours at maximum horsepower or maximum torque, and then cycling. So dyno work is really, really important. You can't just do dyno work. You have to also eventually do in-field testing in real life, because there's things that you miss. Okay. That's a chassis roll, unlike an engine dyno, and there are other things you learn from the chassis rolls, obviously. Okay. This is some of the instrumentation that we put in the car for that day at the DeLorean test. We ran the fifth wheel, it ran a lot of other measurements, and the process of it recorded it and went to a hard drive at that time. We didn't have laptops, so this stuff was pretty sophisticated stuff in its day. Today's laptop is probably as good as all that equipment you saw slide back. Okay, there's the converted room up in the tower. And you can see John DeLorean. This is Zora Dantoff. Okay? And that's Barry Wills. So, that's how he looked years back, when he had hair and sideburns. Of course, he came out of Belfast, so. And those are all the pieces, by the way, for the DeLorean turbo that went into the car, and we covered them piece by piece with them. So that meeting lasted, that was breakfast, I suppose, and then it lasted through lunch. And as you can see, we had slide projectors. Imagine it? Slide projectors. Good. Okay. Now for the fun part. Okay. That was our tractor trailer. By the way, that tractor trailer also had a top fuel transfer in it, but in any case, those cars were naturally aspirated twin turbo. The cars next to it were Alpines. Those were the original development cars that we used before DeLorean was available. They used 2.6 liter engines in them instead of the 2.8.5 that you have now in your cars. And that car weighs nothing. It weighs nothing. And if you put your engine mark in that car, it is blistering fast. That car is about 600-700 pounds lighter than your car. So And then there is I think there's a 928 and a Z car, a Datsun Z, and something. Corvette down there, right. So all those cars were representative of performance cars of its day. And we thought it was a fair comparison to have some of those cars there. So, that's the fifth wheel. We did some acceleration testing, including hot laps, and then we actually didn't only do track testing, we went all the way through Sag Harbor. I think the club met in Sag Harbor one year, didn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. So we went all the way through Sag Harbor. We had a film car following us. John drove. John, I never saw John as excited as he was this day with this car. He says, because this is really, his words to me after he got out of the car, he says, this is really marketable. This is something I can really market. It became the fastest legal production car in the world at the time. We had, even though we only advertised 6 seconds, there was 60s, we were really in the 5s. And the 5s at that time, that was, what were Ferraris done at that time?
Probably 7-second car.
Yeah, Ferraris are a 7-second car in its time. Today we have sedans that are much faster. So it gives you an idea. And Don's Z06 is a 3.7 car, so that gives you an idea where it's at. Okay, here's John observing one of the runs, I suppose. Okay. That was a twin turbo car. And if anybody notice anything strange about this picture? It's a good quiz. No?
Nose is on.
We're going the wrong way around the track.
Okay.
Okay? Okay. So, anyhow, that's the end of the straightaway. Very long straightaway, by the way. And this was a 0 to 60 times ran first. Quarter mile. That was a naturally aspirated car against a turbo car. And that's Zora and I talking about some of the day's events. It was really very special. He's not alive anymore either, but he was a really neat guy. A Russian guy came over here, really made well. Sean and I. Sean's a little taller than I am. Yeah. Okay. Next question. That's John leaving. That's after we went through Sag Harbor. We came back. Congratulated me. He wanted to order. I think the order went from 2,000 cars to 7,000 at that time. After he drove it, he said, "You're building 7,000 of these," which is obviously just a little total production of the cars today. Okay. Next. Okay, this car is a special car. I don't even know if Mark knows about this, but this car here was, we were going to come out with an S-Class version of this car with a much higher horsepower rating. And the reason we couldn't up the horsepower, which you probably know about, was because of the transmissions. Although John wanted us to release the higher horsepower version of this, the engine really had much more horsepower left in it. The transmissions weren't capable of handling torque capacity. So what we were going to do is introduce the turbo, and then a year later do an S-Class version when we got the new transmission with higher horsepower, bigger tires, and that probably would have been a 4.7 car. But that's typical of that S-Class car and how much power it produced. So new clutches, everything, because it just ate everything up. And that almost picked the wheels off the man, I couldn't. Oh, go back 1 second. That was also at McCarthy. We used to rent the airport also, so we didn't get arrested too often. So that was at, I think it was MacArthur Airport. Okay, next. Now, that's another slide that nobody has seen before. That picture, we were going to start a race program, and those were the renderings we did for the new DeLorean, and that might have been some of what happened with the S-Class car. So, that's a slideshow for me. Anyhow, one other thing. We had about, this was that day's events in terms of, it's about a 4-inch binder, I guess 4 or 5-inch binder. This is some of the engineering data that went into it, which we shared with Mark and some of the people who really have a passion for these cars. There are a few other books like this around, but there was a lot of passion and love that went into this. And when it did really come to fruition, what bothered us was not the money part of it. It was really the effort that went into doing something like this and the excitement that involved. And people look back, they said, aren't you aggravated? I had a very dear friend of mine I grew up with. He says, aren't you mad at John DeLorean? I said, no. I said, what are you thinking? He got arrested so he didn't have to pay me? I said, yeah, you're going to, so if, and John, I will tell you, wrote me a personal check for whatever he had at the time because he felt indebted to the work that we did and after they had taken over the company. So it speaks well of the man. I mean, he didn't have to give me 5 cents, literally. He could have just walked away from it. So as far as being a good person, to me, he was always heads up with me, and I had a good relationship with him. At this time, I think I'll answer some questions if I know the answer. I will tell you that some of the people in this room know more about this product than I do. They live it day in and day out, and I have to remember from moment to moment, certain things. So, let's see if you can stop me there.
What made the S-Class engine better? What did you do?
There was more boost in it. There was more boost in it, and we were going to run it on better premium fuel. So that you literally, turbo engine is fairly easy. You just keep on turning the wick up, and you can get more power. But it's not only that. There are new camshafts for that engine also. There were new camshafts for the engine you have also. And not many people know, again, here's a trivia question for you. There's a special camshaft on the right and the left bank. There are 2 different camshafts in this engine. That's how it was designed. When we saw this engine initially, we really thought that they ran out of money when they first started designing it because it started as a very expensive engine. It was a very expensive engine to build, and for some reason they dropped the ball somewhere along the line, and then we had to finish it. And that's really what happened. But getting more horsepower, different pistons, different camshafts, different timing mapping, and more boost. Probably get 100 more horsepower easily out of that engine to make it later. It was the torque that turned it down, not the horsepower. Anybody else?
Fred?
Yeah.
You said that the early engines, that the initial ones used to blow up on the dyno after about 12 minutes, and later on get into the transmission pumps. Did you share any of that with Mark? Because he has that same problem with all his cars.
I'm sure it's not the driver, right?
It might be.
The engines were blowing up for a number of reasons. The pistons were caving the ringlands in. The ringlands were collapsing. That was one thing, so we went to Moly pistons in that. We looked at a lot of pistons. We ended up with Moly pistons in it. The head gaskets were blowing out, which is kind of understandable. There were overheating problems. There were a few things that we had to get by. Different head bolts that were stretching. Most people, the people in this room have taken it apart know it's a wet sleeve engine, so that everything moves in that engine. It's not rock solid, so it's not the best for high horsepower application. Anybody else?
This logo looks a little bit different than what's on like the intakes and other things.
It's probably close. Somebody took some liberties probably in this, but what you have on your car is probably as close as it is.
Okay.
Yeah. Yes.
How many production kits, pre-production kits were made?
I think in total if you count the Alpines, there were 2 Alpines. Okay.
Can I correct you for a second?
Yeah.
It's not a kit.
Yeah.
Right. Okay, it's not a kit.
How many pieces have disappeared?
Well,
okay, but
but in terms of, there's a lot of total systems as it concerns dynamometer systems. We had a lot of engines. So there were many, many configurations of this thing. I'd have to really look it up to tell you how many. In terms of how many cars there were, that's another issue. But in terms of how many total applications there were, in terms of total engines, there were racks of these things at the time. And they were in various stages. I think what?
What happened to them?
Well, some of them when we closed down, the stuff got auctioned off. Some of the guys here have some of them. They floated around. There's a lot of bootleg stuff, too, that claims that, they were DeLorean engines that really own it. It didn't come from us anyhow. And Rob Brady, is Rob in the room?
he had to leave early.
Rob did an awful lot of work, and he knows an awful lot about this product also. Yes?
I know this question doesn't have a yes or no answer, but what would have happened if those 7,000 cars had gotten made? How would it have changed the automotive industry?
That's pretty interesting. It isn't a yes or a no, but I think it would have changed the course of the company considerably. There were a lot of doom and gloom type people all over the world. wanting to see John DeLorean fail, because he was a maverick guy. He stepped out of the envelope and did it. The car would have made it because it would have had stature within the magazines and the performance of people. And I think that we were getting the design. John had asked me to come in and run the company, and I turned him down 3 times. The last time he asked me was the day he finally got arrested, and the night before, actually. And I was going to finally take the job because he was just too busy with all the political aspects of it and wasn't actually doing what he knows how to do best, which is build cars and run them. I think we were also going to get the contract for the 2+2. So there was a 2+2 in design. I think the answer is once the credibility surfaced through those 7,000 cars and they got out, I think other product would have spawned other product. And lots could have happened. It was just as big as people's imagination at the time. Yeah.
When John, after he got arrested and went through his whole spiel with the courts, did he ever have any private conversations with you about it? You could talk about his comments about his arrest and the whole thing with the whole, did he ever disclose anything to you that you could share?
No, I chose not to even ask him about it.
You never brought it up?
Oh yeah, we talked about it an awful lot. I think the most distressing part for John was, here's a guy that was in the pinnacle of automotive greatness. There were only a few guys. If you went down to the street and asked somebody who the Vice President of the United States was then, they probably wouldn't, a few people wouldn't even know. If you asked them who John DeLorean was, or Lorenzo Ferrari was, they'd know right away who those people were. And I think what bothered John more was not the money, it was the effort he put into it and stuff like that, and it just killed his dream. I mean, this whole country is built on entrepreneurial spirit. That's the strength of this country. And I think that's the strength that's going to get us out of all the crap that we're in now. And the reality is that I think the sad part of all of that is that he didn't live his dream. He didn't get a chance to live his dream, and he didn't believe it would take him this long to come back. We had discussions, not about his case specifically, but about building another car, which we were going to do together. So, to answer your question, he always stood on the same story in terms that he was innocent and it was really an entrapment case, and more than that, he really couldn't bring. But I can only tell you that the relationship between the two of us is solid.
Okay, and he also spoke to you, you mentioned that you guys were working together on a new car.
Yeah.
He said things were being built. Have you seen anything that, since the collapse of the original company until today, did you ever see any actual prototypes that were built?
No.
Nothing?
No. We had a couple of options on an engine. We had a 12-cylinder engine that was potentially 1,000 horsepower naturally aspirated. We were building a real supercar at the time, and then we're going to build another car off of it for the masses. But that would have been a very expensive car. Probably a $500,000.
It never got to the prototype stage, right?
Didn't get into development. Forget about prototype. There's 2 prototypes. There's prototyping, and there's production prototype.
Right.
So, somebody else I saw him.
What are you working on now?
It's a good question. We are working on a few things right now that are really under an NDA and non-disclosure. We have some pretty exciting stuff coming. It's a different world today, and to be sure. And I think what you're going to see come is stuff that's pretty exciting, that has environmental consciousness to it also. That you can still get all the excitement and high performance out of the product and still be environmentally friendly. And we're involved in a series of things right now that hopefully next time we get together in about a year or so we'll be able to disclose to you. But the most important thing is you have to start off with great people. If you start off with great people and just let their fertile minds run, you're going to do a lot of exciting things in the world. And because they're small companies, they're not laced with all the problems. From board of directors and bureaucrats and people like that, you can do great things. We're really unfair to large companies in this country. If you're in those companies, which I've worked for Ford and I've worked for White Mud Company, to understand what somebody has to do to get through a great idea, and make it really come to fruition, it's really gut-wrenching. Chris Theodore, who was the chief engineer at the company at Legend, went on to become executive vice president of engineering at Ford. He retired early because he couldn't take it. He couldn't take the bureaucratic nonsense that it has to go through. And it's one of the most talented engineering guys in the world. So, Yes.
So, I know you can't say much, but is this something for the masses that you're working on?
Yes.
Or something special?
Yep. Yep. It's not $500,000. So, it's somebody out there. Okay. That's it.
Thank you, Fred.
All right, Fred's going to be at Gettysburg for Ken's show. Everyone go and get your dessert and your coffee now and sit back down. We're going to give Ken some time to talk about his show.